Hello and welcome to this episode of Why Pals Tales from the Super Yacht Laundry. I'm here with my very special guest, Deirdre Colgan. See, look, I did say it in kind of an Irish way. I always get really paranoid about saying people's names correctly. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, how are you? I'm excited. I actually listened to this podcast, so I feel like I've cheated because I do listen.
Well, you wanted to just come on and have a chat. This is one of the things with the podcast that I've heard, which I really appreciate to all of our listeners, is it feels like you could just come and join the conversation. Like we're all sat around with a glass of rosé and you can just chip in. But obviously better than that, you're actually joining us for this episode. And for those of you that are just listening, unfortunately, you're going to miss the coolest wallpaper I've ever seen. Like she's got some really amazing full-on nautical wallpaper on her wall. I have to say, I quite like. That's quite special.
Yeah, and it says Nauticus, which is pretty close to Nautilus. And I panic hung it. My husband had a Zoom interview, and I had bought it, and we panic hung it. And we just had the strip behind his laptop for a long time, so he had a background for his interview. So
it's really, really funky wallpaper. I like it. I love the nautical feel. It looked really good in my bathroom, if I'm honest.
Yeah,
we're just redecorating.
Too.
Yeah, no, it's really good. Right, anyway, enough talk about wallpaper. Obviously, I've spoken to you a little bit. Did I slip into your DMs or did you slip into mine? I don't know.
You had put like a slider for, how much do you like this on Instagram? And my clumsy fingers brought it to like 10%. And I was like, oh no, she's going to think I don't like her. And that's going to mess with the metrics people see. And I sent you a message and I was like, I'm really sorry. And I tried to change it and it wouldn't let me change it.
Right. So it's okay. You got worried. It's okay. We know you love us. We know you love us. So you're on. So obviously we ended up talking. You're in America. I haven't spoken to anybody stateside. Actually that's a lie. I spoke to Sierra. She's in New York, but you're in a yachty hotspot in Florida. It's not as windy right now, which is good.
Yeah, and a tornado came through our area, and yesterday I drove by where it had been, and like trees just turned into wood chips. So, and my husband's a captain, he's away, and he's like, when I get back, we need to update our hurricane plan, because he's captain.
How do you feel about that? Because obviously when you move to a new country, you're like, oh, just getting on with life, and then you need a hurricane plan. You're like, what? When I was in New Zealand, I experienced my first earthquake. I literally stood there. I'm like, we don't have earthquake training in England. Can you tell me what I need to do? All of these Kiwis just looked at me a bit gone out. I'm like, when we run, you run, basically, in a very laid back Kiwi way. So how does that feel? No hurricanes in Ireland, just a lot of rain.
Just a lot of wind and rain. I lived in St. Martin before I was in yachting, and I was really scared with hurricanes. But with a hurricane, it's coming and you can prep. I would take a hurricane over an earthquake because an earthquake just shows up. Nobody knows. And St. Martin has both. So I found earthquakes scary. So hurricane is just prep. And if they tell you to evacuate.
Where do you go?
Well, the problem with Florida is, it's long and skinny, so you just kind of have to go up. So we were lucky we were south of the hurricane this time, but they weren't expecting all of these tornadoes to kind of break off. And my husband was away, and he does all the man jobs. He puts up the shutters and makes sure there's nothing outside and all of that, and I'll go and buy water and canned soup, So that was harder. But it's always busy for him if there is a hurricane, because then he'll have a boat to secure too. He'll have to double up on lines and everything. So I was talking to my sister-in-law the day before the hurricane, and she was like, can I ask you, why do you live in Florida? Hurricanes, crocodiles. And I was like, I'm asking myself the same thing today, Lauren. So, and then Ronan my little boy ended up off school for a week, and I had no plan. was like, what are we going to do? So I had ordered everything to make Christmas puddings because you can't get all of the stuff easily here. And we always made it at least 5 weeks ahead. So I was like, we'll make Christmas puddings. And now he thinks it's Christmas. So I know. So that night, because we do a little Friday night movie night, he was like, watch Home Alone. And now he's asking for Christmas music in the car. And
oh, wow, you've started really early.
Yeah, I'm like, it's not Christmas yet, but it's not even Halloween. So, so that's kind of what came out of the hurricane.
So anyway, I suppose less weather talk now. Obviously, Yacht Pearls of Wisdom is all about the real stories of where, what happened, how you got out of the yachting industry. But we need to start at the beginning. What were you doing before you found the yachting industry?
Architecture. So
I was not expecting you to say that. Okay.
So, I studied architectural technology, was working in that, loved it. And then, the crash happened in Ireland and building was the first thing hit. And then I had a recruitment agent say, would you go overseas? And at that time, it was all Australia and Dubai. Most of my class from college are still in Australia. They went out there. They're there. I'm like, spiders, bungee jumping. It's just not.
Sharks and crocodiles and bad weather.
And then Dubai was another one. And my dad was still alive at the time. He really didn't want me to go out to Dubai. He was an aircraft engineer and he had worked in the Middle East in like the 80s and 90s. And he was like, from his experience, he was like, it's not a place for a woman. Like, I don't want you to go there. And I was like, okay, I won't. And then I got a call saying St. Martin. I'd never heard of it. So I pretended I had. And they wanted someone kind of a bit more experienced than me, but I had done a project management qualification. So I just totally blagged it. And then January 16th, 2009, went out to St. Martin.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so I spent 2 years there and I was working on site, which again wasn't the plan, but I loved it. And I kind of realized how ill-suited I was to an office. And I made a lot of yacht crew friends, one particularly Nick, and he would like come stay at my apartment and he was like, you'd be great for yachting. And I was like, I can't imagine anything worse. I had seen their cabins, like I'd been on the boat, and there was just like the little quirks, like when you'd have friends come to your apartment and they'll kind of sit politely, you have crew come to your apartment and then they'll just root through the fridge or they'll be like, oh, I'll just make this food. And like, I wasn't bothered by it, but I was like, there's just like this little difference between, civilians and crew. And then I left
It adopted you, really. It sounds like you'd already started to be sucked in. They're like, oh, you're all right. You could be crew, even if you don't ever get on board.
Yeah, because I just kind of, I suppose, took people as they were and had a laugh. And then I moved back to Ireland. I thought things had picked up construction-wise, and they hadn't. And then I got a job out in Barbados. And when I left, I said, if this doesn't work out, I'll give yachting a go. And then it was a Ponzi scheme. So,
oh no.
Yeah. So I was lucky that when the penny dropped, I was, I just said, I can't do this. The guy, he was a 3 times bankrupt, like ex-triple glazing salesman.
Nice.
And he had done it in Thailand and he had done it somewhere else. And now he was doing it in Barbados. So I left, and I was lucky because about a month later they went into the office and they rounded everybody up and deported them. And if you've been deported from anywhere, it makes it a lot harder to get visas. So
yeah, that's the end of traveling, really.
Yeah. So Nick, the same guy, was like, okay, you can do it. So I booked my STCW and a stew course, and I went to Fort Lauderdale and booked into Mary's crew house and started. That was late summer 2012.
So obviously you'd already, you'd met the crew and everything else, but how did, can you remember your first impressions of the job itself? Like when you actually started work? Because you're actually like a professional, you've got like a professional degree. And, as much as I give credit to the amazing job we do on board, it isn't building buildings or designing them?
I don't know. Like I just was, because you see these boats and you don't really think, oh, people work on those or live on them. You know, and I've even had guests on boats being like, how do you get here every day? And we were like, helicopter before you get, you know, you play with them. So I just thought it was the bizarrest thing. And it's a lifestyle choice. It's not like, it's like the priesthood. It's not just a job, it's your whole life. So I was like, I'll give it a go for 2 years and then go back to architecture. But then I met my husband at pretty much exactly 2 years. And, you know, and then I moved up to chief stew shortly after. And being chief stew is a lot more enjoyable than being like a third stew, you know, and you have a lot more responsibility, you're making more money, and I enjoyed it. And when I was in architecture, I had no kind of delegation skills. Like I had interns, I had people below me, and it had never really gone that well. And I wasn't good at like hitting any issues head on or speaking up for myself. And that was something that I really needed and that yachting gave me, because you can't let anything fester on a boat. Like you have to go and you have to address it, and I'll be shaking and sweating, but you have to do it for the sake of yourself and the rest of the crew. So yachting really gave me that. And the plan kind of was to go back to architecture, but like that, I wanted to be on site. And then the last boat I was on, we got a stern extension and we needed to get new uniform. We needed to get t-shirts, and we didn't have the drawings back from the naval architect or anything. And I was like, sure, I have CAD on my laptop, and I went outside and took some pictures. And I was like, you wouldn't be able to pull measurements from it, but I drew the boat and, you know, we put it on the back of the t-shirt. But also I was really good at yard periods, so I was hired a lot for yard periods because I was used to contractors. I knew how the joinery and all of that would have worked, so I did do well that way, and I enjoyed that.
Did you like, so was it, did you just, obviously with the yard periods, most crew just want to get out of the yard, but you kind of found your stride in the yard?
Yes. And the last boat that I was on that I loved, I actually joined temporarily. I was like, I'll just do the yard period. And then when they were getting ready to leave, the captain was like, would you just stay? He was like, I think you're the right person for me and for the owner and for the crew. And I had never had a lot of confidence, and I was actually at a point where I could believe that, and I was like, yeah, why not? And it was the best decision I made. And it was so nice to leave the industry on a high, on such a good boat with such a good crew. And like, you know,
did you obviously, how long did you stay on board? Like, how long were you in the industry for?
6 years.
6 years. So did you start to feel like you wanted to leave, or did it just kind of flow that way?
I got pregnant. So we were talking about, because myself and Colin had been together for a few years. So while I was on that boat, I had the idea for the uniform company. And I sew for a hobby, and I had wanted an embroidery machine for fun. So when I did those t-shirts for the boat, when I did the drawing, I was like, I could do this. And I always liked using smaller companies on board. So, you know, we had this really great carpenter with a small company, and I had a small, unfortunately they've since closed down, a small uniform supplier. And so I just kind of thought there is a different way. And my husband was always like, make your own job and you could do this. And I was like, oh no, I couldn't. So, you know, he really brought that out of me. And I understood textiles, and I'm really nerdy. So I wanted to know all about how the printing works, how the embroidery works. And it just kind of came together.
Like it just flowed like into it. It's really, obviously we've spoken to a number of individuals on this podcast now, and I've spoken to hundreds of women. one of the upsides of being on board is I do think with the right attitude and kind of maybe self-reflection, you could end up doing something that you actually really enjoy. Do you know what I mean? The pieces, you can have that freedom and that flexibility to reinvent yourself rather than being petrified of it. You know, being open to like, what could I do next? Where could it go? Obviously, with the right support. It sounds like your husband's amazing. But there you go, just an interest in sewing coupled together with a life experience, a great husband, and there you go.
Yeah, and I had a great captain and a great owner at the time too. And the captain, like I spoke to him about the idea and he was like, I think you would be great at it. And the other thing was when you're on a boat and you're using a uniform company and you maybe want to switch or they're taking really long and the artwork setup fees for a new company can be like $1,000. And the other company, even though the artwork, you sent them those files, they're sometimes the only one who actually has that artwork because the captain's lost it and everyone's lost it. So it's like, what happens with the artwork? And, you know, CAD is a vector. So I'm like, well, I can just draw it. I'll just redraw it. Like, feck off. Like, I'm going to draw it and I'm going to go to a new company. And that was something I had been doing. And my husband was like, that's it right there. Because he was like, we're all ransomed to these kind of few big companies because they have our artwork. So
Yeah.
that was kind of my thing. And it's become a thing now where I'll, you know, redo the artwork. So yeah, and then
you've got your dream, you're doing it. What's it like being an entrepreneur?
it's hard because I just kind of thought like I'll do it with yachting because I know so many people and I know the industry. It's really hard to break in still, you know, and I had my first year was really great. I was making money and I had 2 boats that I was just churning stuff out for. And then they put both of them, there's 2 different owners. They both went on the market within a month of each other. So then things kind of slowed down, but sometimes you never know kind of what's meant to happen because last year bought a house, we moved house. My son was diagnosed with autism and we put him, when we moved, he went into a new school and it was awful. And I pulled him out of school for a few weeks and then we hired an advocate and I rained hell down on the school and they had to hire a proper teacher. We got the school district involved, but it was this time last year, that was pretty much a full-time job. So I'm kind of missed out on the Fort Lauderdale boat show and everything last year. And now he's in a new school. He's happy. He's doing really well. So I'm trying to gain back that traction, but I'll never, like before we started recording, we were talking about how, you know, as the mother, as the woman, you always put yourself last, you know, and my husband started a new job and there was all the background checks and everything. And I was helping him with all of that. And, you know, Ronan's getting settled into his new school. And I was like, well, now I can. And my husband was like, well, why can't you do that currently? Why can't you be doing that all the time? And I was like, you boys don't realize how much work you are. So
No, but it's the female experience. So like
yeah.
you know, if you're taking being a wife and a mother seriously, you don't have time for yourself. Because it
No.
is, I think, to do the job properly with supporting a husband and a child or multiple children, you know, is kind of the ultimate sacrifice. So let's just go back to, did you come up with the idea for the business when you found out you were pregnant, or you found out you were pregnant, you were going to get off, and then it kind of, that was after? Where, like, let's fill the timeline
came up
in.
with the idea for the business and I spoke to the captain and I was offered rotation and I was like, amazing. I had a tiny little studio apartment in Fort Lauderdale. I had a car. So they kind of let me name my date. And this was like, I don't know, February, March. And I said, look, I'll work all the way up until, I think I was going to work until August or October and then take the 3 months. And then I was going to be 3 months on, 3 months off. And in that time, I got the whole interior set up. Like we'd had a big refit. And I'm a big list maker, dailies, weeklies, monthlies, you know, pre-charter checklists, like 48 hours before, 24 hours before, like morning of, like when you get the call that they're on the tender. So I had kind of the Bible set up. And then I was saving for embroidery machines and the whole lot. And then in May, my now husband, was turning 40. So I flew back from the Bahamas to the States. We went away for a week, and then I got back to the boat, and I had bought a new sports bra when I was away for his birthday. And I went to put it on. I was like, oh, sure, I picked the right size. This feels really tight. And then we did a charter, a bus trip, and then we did like a photo shoot trip where we were having photos taken for the charter website. And I was just feeling tired, and I was like, man, I'm getting too old for this. I'm 35. I'm so tired.
Ancient at 35.
Yeah. And then why don't my sports bras fit? And then we had a few days off between trips, and I was like, shit, am I pregnant? So we were in the Bahamas, we were in Nassau, and it was a holiday. And I told the chief engineer, and then my cabin mate was like my third stew, and she was moving up to be crew cook, and she actually just won the chef competition at the Newport Boat Show. So,
well done.
So I told the two of them. We went out for sushi, and I didn't eat raw fish or drink sake. So they were like, what's going on? And I was like, I'm pregnant. So we get in a taxi. They're pissed as farts after all the sake. And we drive around with a probably drunk taxi driver, trying to find a pharmacy that's open so I can find a stick to pee on. But everything's closed because it's a holiday. So we finally find this pharmacy, and I buy an expired pregnancy test.
Oh my God.
I know. And it's like when I was doing prenatal yoga, and, you know, you're talking to the other people, and they're like, you know, we've been married for a few years, so we decided we'd try. And then I was like, yeah, similar story. So I go to my cabin, and Charlie and Kendra, the engineer, and the stew are outside, and I'm on the phone to Colin, and he's in the village well in Fort Lauderdale with his friend having a beer, and I'm peeing on a stick. But at that point, because I'd been kind of thinking for more than a week, but I couldn't go anywhere to get a test. And at first I was terrified, but at that point I was like, I've kind of gotten used to this idea. If it's negative, I'll actually be disappointed, which was something
that means you're with the right guy. That means you're with the right guy. That's, you know, that kind of confidence, like, yeah, if it's either way, I think that's down to being with the right guy. You're like, I can imagine. But it become
kind of a crew joke, because the week or two before we went away for Colin's 40th, because we were talking about, like, you know, I was going to get rotation, we could hopefully buy a house and the whole lot and move. And he was like, well, why don't we just get pregnant? And I was like, you just midlife crisis, you're turning 40. So it became this running joke. And then he just obviously willed it into existence.
Well, kind of willed it.
Yeah.
It was just extra romantic.
Yeah. And then the captain was away, and I didn't want to say anything at first. And because Colin is a captain, and then also after I joined that boat, it turned out the captain and Colin, when they first started yachting and were like day working, like 20 years previous, were like friends. And so they actually knew each other quite well. So Colin was like, look, you need to tell the captain. And I was like, I want to wait. I don't want to give him my job yet. So I told the captain, and, you know, I was like, let's not tell anyone. But of course, the whole crew knew by the end of the day. And then for the first few months, I was pregnant on the boat, and it was kind of fun because, you know, every week you get your new fruit. So on Saturdays, we would sit down and be like, oh, it's a blueberry. It's not a peppercorn. Oh, it's a raspberry now. And we had two really young deckhands. They were like 20 and 21, and they were like, and so I was, the boat mom, and I was like, I'm not going to love you any less, boys.
That's so funny.
Still my first babies. So yeah,
that's nice that you were on a boat that's nice about it.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, we've heard horror stories of basically as soon as someone's confessed the state of them, like, off you go, see you later kind of thing. So it's really nice to hear that a boat was kind of really warm about it. But was it like end of season, or were you meant to like be doing
and I
some
actually
stuff?
ended up leaving the boat a little bit sooner than planned, because we had trips coming up and they wanted to hire a couple, because we had some other crew members move on at the same time, and they found a couple, and I was like, okay, like I'll head on. But they did another really important thing for me, and this is something I saw on like the the yachty name, shame and fame thing. I was able to buy out my insurance plan, so I had health insurance on the boat. When I started yachting, I made wrong decisions. I got on, programs that weren't professional programs, where you didn't have insurance, you didn't have a proper contract. I'm glad I eventually got to the point where I respected myself enough to be like, if I don't get benefits, I'm not stepping on board. So they did a thing, it's called Cobra, where they keep you on the group, and they pay a lot less than you would for your own individual insurance. Plus, by the time you're already pregnant, a lot of insurance companies don't want to take you. So they let me buy out my insurance policy so that I was insured through my pregnancy.
That's really good.
So
that's really good. Really good. I think as crew members, you're not, when it comes to this stuff, you're not asking for the owner to pay for your baby, but there are things that could be done that they could do to help you support yourself, Well,
that's it. And even with the conversation of I'm pregnant, and like, obviously I'm not going to be able to stay on the boat, but it was like, I wasn't treated like a liability. It was like, okay, obviously you're going to transition off the boat. How do we help you through that? How do we? And I was lucky that I already had my teeny tiny little apartment, and I had my car, and, I got back to Fort Lauderdale, and then a few weeks later, Colin left. He was in New York. And when he came back, I was like 6 months pregnant. So like he left, I was like 3.5 months, like no bump or anything. And he came back and he was like, Jesus, like you're pregnant. So
yeah,
I think
it's real,
because when you're female and you're pregnant, it's all happening. I think it's harder for the man because it's this obscure thing that's happening next to them, but they're not physically experiencing it. So I think it was kind of a shock to him.
So you're having your baby in America. Like, what was, you've got your little flat, you've got your little car. Have you got anything else?
So I had some savings, luckily, because I'd been saving for the business and everything. And then when I found out I was pregnant, I mean, the first thing we did was get in touch with an immigration lawyer. And he was like, you need to get back before you have a bump. Because we weren't married at that time. We'd been together like 4 years or something, and we'd been talking about it. But like, once you get married, then you can't work. So I kept putting it off. So Colin was really stressing out. He was like, just please come back. I don't want you to get deported. So I got back when I was like a bit over 3 months. Then I didn't have a bump till I was like 5 months. I was like, I could have stayed on the boat. And also, once you hit that second trimester, you're not so tired anymore. So he got back, and we had a little courthouse wedding for the Broward County Courthouse. And then we were starting the immigration process. And then we moved up here. We moved out of Fort Lauderdale. We were renting a house close to where we have our house now. And yeah, we just had to be like, right, like, because we didn't live together, like we were always in different places, and we just kind of had to throw a life together,
What about home? Like, they're like, obviously, your family back home, like, did they want to come out?
Well, it was hard. They did, and it was hard because once I started the immigration process, I couldn't leave the country. Um, and it ended up taking a lot longer than anticipated. And when my son was born, my mother wanted to come and be here, but she had just had a carcinoma, like a skin cancer, removed from her face, or she was waiting to have the surgery, so she couldn't travel. So when he was 3 weeks old, she came over. But it was hard because we moved to Loxahatchee. After a certain amount of time, because I would have to renew my US driver's license every 6 months, and then I couldn't do that. So I had no driver's license. We're living in a new place. I had no family. Colin was away sometimes.
You
And it
can't
was
really
just,
walk anywhere in America either. Like, it's
no,
not many houses are near like the street where you can go and have a wander and then come back. It's
no.
all very far apart.
There was a little park with a playground directly across from the house we were living in, so that was good. And I met a couple of neighbors there. But it was really hard because I'd gone from, you know, living in a tin can with 10 people and having a laugh to just, you know, and even when I was in Fort Lauderdale in my tiny apartment, like, excuse me, friends were in and out. And I knew my way around, and I could go here and I could go there. And I didn't have a baby. Like, we moved when I was, I think, 7 months pregnant. You know, when they're little, there's just so much shit. You've got the bag, you've got the, and then they will have a massive blowout when you're out or when you're ready to go out, and it'll be up their neck and in their hair, and then you have to put them in the bath. So it is hard when they're little to go anywhere. And,
But it's
and now,
also, it's terrifying. So one of the things I've said, and we're obviously going to cover it with all, as many episodes as we can with motherhood. So obviously, when you choose to have your, you just said yourself to work on super yachts, you kind of would have probably stayed until 5 months if you could have,
yeah,
you would have stayed on the boat longer. But what, obviously, after listening to accounts of other women and like myself, the longer, if you don't get a chance to build any kind of support network around you, I don't think we all realize how important it is to have support, because, like you said, you go from being constantly with people to not. And then having a baby is also a little bit isolating experience as it is, because most of the time, because little ones aren't easy, like you said, you've got a bag full of stuff, they might explode, they might be really teething. You don't go out as much. You just don't. You just tie your hair up in a top bun and you put on the comfy trousers and you just try to survive the day. It's definitely something I think we should all talk about. But also, before you even get to the baby bit, the labour bit in hospital. I mean, was your husband was able to be with you during
yeah,
your
he
birth?
was. And like the owners at the time, they were supportive of that. That I ended up in labor for 3 days, and then Ronan was in NICU for a week because when he was born, he wasn't doing that well. So we ended up in the hospital for 9 or 10 days, and they were supportive of that. And my mother-in-law was here at the time. My husband's father passed away when I was pregnant, so I wanted her to come and be part of it. At that time, we didn't know each other. I had met her once, and there's cultural differences and stuff. We get along well now, but at the time, not that we didn't get along. It was just we didn't understand each other. We didn't,
Where is she from? Where's your husband
She's
from?
American. He's originally from California, but grew up mostly in Seattle, and his mother's from California. And then the more you get to know people, the more they make sense to you. Like, I grew up, we didn't talk about money. It wasn't something we talk about. And Colin's mother is very forthright about money. And I found it crass. And as I've gotten to know her, so when she got married young, and her husband, Colin's dad made all of the decisions, and he made some poor decisions, and she wasn't involved in them. And her trying to push me, it's like, well, no, because you need to be in it together. And she's trying to protect me. She's trying to be like, you need to be in charge of the money too.
Nice.
But at the time, I didn't understand that. I just was like, she's a bit obsessed with money, but she's not. So I just think there was differences. And then I know she initially found me a bit cold because, I'm not from California. We don't hug. My mother doesn't tell me she loves me. I don't say it to her. It doesn't mean that we don't. It's just something we don't say,
Yep.
And like if I go home after a year, I'll get a hug. When I'm leaving for another year, I'll get a hug. If I lived in Ireland and we saw each other all the time, there would be no hugs, and it's just, so for Colin's mother, she was like, so again, it's just when you, and I don't know if it's even like different countries or a cultural thing. But yeah, when you kind of marry two families together, it's, it's
difficult.
It's different.
Well, it's not difficult. It just takes a while to get. You could have the same experience, but with obviously a partner that's from Ireland. All families have to merge together. But again, because we are so transient, and also her son's transient by the job that he does, it's hard. It takes a while to build up these relationships. They don't happen overnight. And also, I'm the same as you. I'm not necessarily cold, but it takes me a while to kind of, go in for the hug.
Yeah.
You've got to smell right. I've got an obsession with I'm not going in for the hug with just old anybody, But it must have been nice to have her around, though, if your mother couldn't.
It was. And even like when we gave him his first bath, like I didn't know what I was doing, and he was tiny and slippery, and to have another person there for things like that, and then I just think as well for her and for Ronan, it was special to be a part of that. And then I did feel bad because we ended up in the hospital for like 10 days, and she just came back up to the house and, was doing some gardening, and we were trying to fill her in and everything. So I think it was stressful for her too. And then, we were given this little potato, and it's like, okay, you can go home now. And it's like, what am I supposed to do now? Like, I don't know what to do. Like, you think I could look after this? Like, I don't know what to do.
So it's I don't know what. Obviously, it just depends. Like my birthing, I just wanted to get out. I just remember wanting to get out of that ward. I couldn't sleep on that ward. There was way too much going on. I'm like, right, okay, if it's me in this little bump, I'm going, because I gave birth during COVID. I mean, Tim wasn't even allowed in the beginning. I had to go in. I had a contraction in the elevator. That was the most surreal. I was like, right, okay, where's the button? Because if I can't get out or I end up on the floor, like, what am I going to do? Like, they just said on the intercom, please come up. I'm like, but when I was in there, and just the fear, I just wanted to get out, which was obviously a mistake, because I ended up having to go back in, like literally a couple of days later. But it is, they just give you, right, okay, this is your responsibility. Now I've watched a few videos and stuff. Right, let's see what. Yeah. But it must be more paranoid. You must be slightly more paranoid if your baby has been in ICU, though. Like, you're just like even more little. He's so precious.
Yeah. And he was the easiest baby right from the start. He didn't sleep, but he was just happy. But when, like, a day or two after we brought him home, they had told us, look, if he doesn't want to eat or he seems a bit limp or anything, bring him straight in. And I remember, like, putting him in the car and, like, rushing down to our new pediatrician when he was a few days old. And then he was fine. But they were like, if you see any of this, you need to get him straight in. So that was really scary. But because all of that happened, I kind of thought, well, the business isn't going to happen now. And, I lost steam. Like, I'd gone through a lot of my savings by being in Fort Lauderdale, not working and pregnant, and medical bills. And my car blew up while I was pregnant, and then, get my car fixed. And so I just kind of thought, that's not going to happen now. And when he was about a year and a half, and you know, things were easier and you're chugging along. Um, Sorry, not even a year and a half. When he was coming up on a year, my husband was like, maybe would you think about that again? And I was like, I don't know, and I don't have the money anymore. And then that Christmas, he was like, what do you want for Christmas? And I was like, maybe just a little embroidery machine so I can just do a bit of embroidery. And he was like, no, because you're going to get that big embroidery machine. You're going to make it happen. And then in the January, himself and my sister loaned me some money and were like, go and do it. And I found like a 12 needle commercial embroidery machine on eBay, and I bought it in March 2020. I got my work permit February 2020. So I was like, I can either go back to work or I can start a business now. Like, I'm legal to work. Finally had a driver's license again. So I got the machine like a week before lockdown.
Oh my God.
But my mother and my sister were here visiting, and they actually got stuck here. So they were hanging out with Ronan. And I remember the first day I was like, how do I even tread this thing? And I kind of spent lockdown teaching myself how to use it.
That's
And I
quite
was
cool
like,
in a way. Like, you know, yeah, for starting a business, probably not so cool, but you still got loads to learn, and it gives you the time and space and no pressure to do it, I guess.
well, that's it. And it was like, okay, nap time. This is what I'm doing. Like, you go to bed, little dude. Like, I'm going to go and do this. And then I was just going to do a bit of embroidery. And I had been on boats where we had stuff on board, and it's like, oh, it needs to be embroidered. So I was like, I'll just do that. And then I had a friend who's a captain, and he was on like a 145 charter boat. And we had lunch, and he was talking about he had just ordered uniform. He got two kind of different sets of things from two companies, and both companies had made mistakes. So he was like, will you do some polos for me? So I ordered the polos, and I was like, oh, I'm actually making more money on the polo here than I am the embroidery. And he was just really encouraging as well. And he was like, of the three companies I used, you're the only one who got it right. And that was my first order. That was the October. And then by that Christmas, like, there was another charter boat. They wanted some embroidered beach chairs, and I got beach chairs, and Colin took them apart so I could get them into the machine. And so I did those, and I just kind of was rocking and rolling and just doing kind of smaller bits. And then 2021, that summer, I was like, right, I'm actually going to make a go of this. And I incorporated the business in the September, and, you know, got a web designer who was my friend Nick, who got me into yachting in the first place. And, you know, got a business mentor, and kind of, and then in March 2022, launched it. And at that point, I already had a few customers who were like, well, why are you just doing a bit of embroidery? Why can't it be more? And you're like, here's things we can't find. And looking back to being 35 and wearing a skirt, you know, and I heard Emma Kate Ross from Seize the Mind on a podcast, and she said when she turned 40 and she was in her skirt and her polo, and she felt like she looked like a 15-year-old playing junior netball. And I was like, exactly. And also, like, my last boat, we had a female first mate, and trying to find shorts to match the boys' shorts that she could actually do her job in, that were comfortable. And so I was like, here are these things that the industry is missing. And also, as someone with a small waist but like a bigger bum, it was really hard to find a skirt. Like, I would have to bring them home to my sewing machine and take them in, because if they fit on the waist, they would ride up on the bum and thighs. If they fit on the bum and thighs, they were too big on the waist, and then the radio pulls it down. So, like, between my husband and my friend Jason and a few other people, I was like, you know what, I can still do this. So it just took a bit longer. And
It's quite amazing. That's, it's really nice to hear, like, you've got, a great support network, and it is, you are having to do all of it, have a baby, have a baby, move to a new place, cope with your partner being away, learning a new skill, a new trade. That's a lot going on, and
Yeah.
you haven't
And then
gone mad.
I mean, not permanently, but like also getting used to being married. Like we didn't live together, so we had to get used to being married and living together and all those quirks, So, and even last night he called me and he's in the hotel because they're waiting on the launch of a new boat. And he's like, I'm trying to do laundry. And he's like walking around and he's like, oh, there's no laundry detergent. And he's walking down to reception. And I just hung up. I was like, I'm not spending 20 minutes on the phone to you while you talk to other people about laundry detergent and try and figure this out. Like, call me when you have a bit of time. I've got things to do, but we're at the point where I can do that and it's fine. And he can laugh about it. But yeah, so, and it's funny because I grew up Catholic and like I've had siblings and friends. When you get married in the Catholic Church, you have to take a pre-marriage course given by a priest, a man who has taken a vow of celibacy. And I'm like,
that makes loads of sense.
Yes, so much sense. Like, it's the most ridiculous thing in the world. So,
I'd actually be really intrigued to hear what he's got to say, because he has no point of reference whatsoever.
Yeah, but neither did I. So I was like, I could have used something. But now we're grand. Like 6 years in, be 6 years at the end of this month. We're like rubbing along okay. So, but I do like being married to someone who isn't here all the time. So like that feels like, and I have friends say to me, oh no, he's away for 3 weeks. Is that not really hard? And I'm like, once it goes past 3 weeks, like a few years ago, he spent 5 months away and that was really hard. But
you don't want to wait too long, but it is kind of nice if they go, because basically you just don't have to clean quite so much, which is quite nice.
Yeah,
you have space for your own thoughts, maybe.
Yeah, you can watch all that trashy telly that they judge you for and make snide comments about. You know,
and you don't have to remember where they've put their stuff.
No,
you just have to worry about your own stuff and the child. You don't have to remember or try to predict where they might have left the thing and that you weren't in the room.
He's a disaster. Like, he called me one day and he said, am I 44 or 45? So
that's bad. That's like when was I born again?
I think he's so, it's just funny because he's very organized as a captain and he is captain safety. Like, there is not a safety regulation he does not know about, and he takes that so seriously. And we didn't work together, so I just find it hard to reconcile the two Collins. But then I'm a different person when I'm at work too, But it is hard for my son now because he's been gone for just over a week, and like Ronan's like, well, where did he go? And they FaceTime and stuff, and we've gone to Ireland to see my family a few times. So all airplanes go to Ireland. So he knows Daddy went on the big airplane. So he's like, he's into Ireland. He's at Granny's house. I'm like, he's not at Granny's house, dude. But yeah.
So you're a solo parent. Obviously if you're a partner, you are a single parent. When they're away, which I think I've got so much respect for. Like, as much as I moan about my husband, he's here, and to do it all on your own, especially when you've got multiple as well, like friends that have got multiple kids and obviously their partner works away. I've got the ultimate respect for having to go through that kind of stuff. Because also when like Daddy comes back, it's like Daddy's the most amazing person on the planet. Because Daddy's not actually you haven't had to ask the kid to do anything they don't want to do. So Daddy's great. Daddy's fun. We're gonna go do some fun stuff. He's not like Mummy. Mummy's just asked me to clear up my clothes or put my jacket on. Mummy's the enemy.
Yeah. I read an article and it was like the major cause of anxiety in people is if when you were a child, your mother was always like rushing you around, or you had a parent and you were always late. And I was like, has this person ever tried to go anywhere with a child? Like, put your shoes on, put your shoes on, put your shoes on. Let's play with the helicopter. Can you go get your backpack? Where's the jet? Like, you're not, like, it always comes to the point where it's like, just put your shoes on. We have to go. We're late. Like, that's going anywhere with the child. So, but yeah, when Colin comes back, Ronan, like, they'll go and spend a bunch of time together, and then I'll have a bit of time. And
I think
also,
what I'll do when we release this episode, there's a comedian called Michael McIntyre, and he does a whole sketch about leaving the house when you have kids, and it had me crying with laughter. And I think when we release this, I'm going to release it on social media at the same time, so people can kind of get their head around what it's actually trying to just leave the house.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
I'm giving up on the parenting articles though, and like, Ronan has mild autism, so he's in a lot of therapy, and one of his occupational therapists gave me an article on why I should stop telling him, like, good job and great job. And I was like, because he was kind of taken off my voice the other day, and I said, oh, is that Mammy? And I said, what does Mammy say? And I was worried he was going to be like, put your bloody shoes on. And he said, Mammy says, I love you. And I was like, oh. And I said, what else does Mammy say? And he said, Mammy says, great job, buddy. And apparently it's not a good thing. And I did read the article, and I was like, you know what?
I don't do it with motherhood. I have to say, you get a bit obsessed with reading everything, and I could, like, I've got my daughter's kind of going through like a regression at the moment. She's 4, and we're having a bit of a battle with her. I can give you an article to fix the problem that goes one way, and I can give you another article that says to do the polar opposite. Like, it's just what feels like it's working. But to tell somebody not to tell that their kid that's doing a good job, I don't understand that.
Yeah, I'm supposed to say, like, oh, that's great that you tried so hard. So you're not supposed to put the word I in it, because it makes it about you and not about them. And then they're doing it for the praise and not for the self-satisfaction of, like, a job well done. So I don't know. And then also a lot of these things that you read, and it's like, okay, if your child is doing this, then these are the steps you follow. Or like with potty training, it's like, this is what you do. And I was like, have they met a child? They've certainly not met my child, because none of this works on him, So, yeah.
No, it's a minefield out there. Don't stress about it. I'm probably a bit old school with me, and I always feel guilty. Like, a lot of the gentle parenting stuff, like, I'd never strike my child, but I will shout if I'm not being listened to. And if she's in danger, I will, if she's running too close to the road, I will sound like a fisherman's wife. And go, get away! Like, I'm not going to go, darling, like, don't do that. Mm-hmm. I will shout, and I'm not ashamed, because kids want to try and kill themselves at all times. The toddler phase was brutal. Like, everything became a hazard. I'm like, she's going to die. She's going to die. Like, she's got no spatial awareness. She's running and looking backwards as she runs.
And then Ronan still wouldn't have a kind of a great sense of danger, so he's what, and I do feel like with autism, they're like, oh, these are autism things. And some of it, I'm like, this is just a kid thing. So he was what was called an eloper, in that he would run off. But we did take it seriously, and we started a therapy, because 2 kids in his, like, speech therapy practice, like, ran off at playgrounds and drowned.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, and he was just like, he'd just be gone. And, you'd go to the shopping center or something, and he loves escalators, and he'd just be gone, and he'd be gone up, or he'd run into a lift and he'd just be gone. So
how did you manage that? So, like, you haven't got all of the stuff as much anymore, but then you've got a child that bolts at any given opportunity.
He has. So Ronan has basically a full-time job. So he does like 27 and a half hours of ABA therapy. So she's with him all day in school. And then he does like 4.5 hours of, and this is a week, he does like 4.5 hours of speech therapy, 3 hours of occupational therapy. And now, like, I mean, he was mild anyway, so he's kind of quirky, but if you met him, you wouldn't be like, and even people in our lives are like, are you sure it's autism? And he's really clever, and he's really easygoing. And he just lives to get a rise out of you, though. He just lives to either make you laugh or drive you mad.
Oh.
So I want to let him be himself. Like, one of the things with choosing ABA is, you know, he hand flaps a little bit when he's excited. And I was like, I have no problem with that. And if that's how he experiences joy and excitement, I don't want to knock that out of him. Like, you know, that we've seen a couple of kids in his therapy practice that when they hand flap, the parent will say a word and then they have to sit on their hands. And I'm like, but you've just taken that moment of joy. But as regards him running out into traffic and getting into lifts by himself, yes, let's work on that. So they made it a game where they would be like, run, 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 stop. So now when you say stop, he stops. So, so he's less of a liability.
That's
but I
great.
mean, still, he's 5. I mean, he plugged a lamp in one day and screwed the light bulb out and then put his finger in it.
It's so funny you said that. Literally a few nights ago, I told Esme to stop playing with the socket, and she said that I wasn't her friend anymore and that she just wanted to live with Daddy. And I'm like, well, at least you'll be alive when you live with Daddy alone. Yeah. And just a reminder, he doesn't do as much as I do.
Yeah. I mean, I do think he would have more fun just him and Daddy, you know, I think. And with Colin being away, I think he misses out on that, like, roughhousing, that kind of Daddy element. Like, let's go hit golf balls outside. And, like, he does miss out on all of that. So he does have, like, an extra bit of energy when Colin's not here that he just channels into being a daredevil and being absolutely nuts.
Being a boy.
Yeah.
You know, that's not being any different. It's just being a boy, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know whether I could cope being a boy mum. I can barely cope as a girl mum. I don't know whether I've got the energy.
I don't know. Like, I don't think I could cope with a girl. Like, we were over at his little friend's house, and another friend of his was there, a little girl, and she was 4. And she didn't want to play with Ronan. And she was like, come on, Patrick, let's go and watch Taylor Swift videos. He's not allowed to come. And I was like, you're 4.
It's
How
the sass.
are you so mean already?
Yeah, girls, there's the sass factor, you know. Yeah. And have I been an outspoken female in my time? Maybe. Just a little bit. Is she going to take after me? Maybe. Just a little bit. I'll deal with that at the time, I suppose. We just need to finish up now. Obviously, we are running out of time, but I just wanted to...
I've been very rambling too.
No, it's great. It's, you know, it's always nice when you're talking to interesting people. So the first thing, 2 final things. What would be your 3 pieces of advice for anybody on board at the moment and, you know, might be thinking about getting out? And, you know, if you could go back and tell the 35-year-old self, what would you say?
That I made the right decision making sure I had insurance. Make sure when you're getting on a boat, you don't know what's going to happen. You're out in the sun, skin cancer. I mean, you know, have your smear tests, have all of that. And then for getting out, have some savings, have a plan. Like, I wish I had saved more. And you don't have to get out and kind of live this big life. You know, I had kind of seen people leave and they, you know, they do these amazing things and they have this big business and they have all of that. Like, you can just get out and just go and be Like, I'm primarily a parent. You know, you don't have to get out and have this big story and have people in yachting think that you're still doing amazing things, because whatever you're doing, you are. And then, do I have 3 pieces of advice, Sydney? I don't know. I think be kind to yourself, look after yourself, don't put yourself last. And if you are a female, those small physical things that don't seem right, go and get them checked out. You know, I probably for another episode, but like, I just ended up putting myself on the back burner for the last few years, and you know, now I've had some lady problems, and tomorrow I have to go and find out like what the next step is, what surgery and stuff. And if I had done this a year ago, maybe it would have been a simpler thing. And like that, when I was on a boat, I wasn't like, well, excuse me, Mr. Captain, I need to go and get this sorted out. And for, you know, older male crew members too, get your prostate checked out.
Yeah.
Go get your skin cancer test checked, like the skin tests and everything. Don't, you know, get your estrogen levels, your testosterone levels, all that stuff that when you're not on a boat, you're doing once a year. Go and do that. So that's
your advice.
Health insurance
That's
is
good.
my big
Insurance is a massive thing. We're doing a big expose on what boats cover, what they don't cover, and where you kind of need to plug the gaps, coming up soon. So that is a really important point. And I think for women it's even more important because there's more going on with us. You know, not saying that the guys don't have to deal with stuff, but there is generally more going on with us, or potential problems, if you know what I mean. So yeah, that's great advice.
Thank you.
So the final thing is, do you have a story you would like to share of something that was a little bit bonkers?
Yeah, I actually, so we were supposed to record this last week, but there was the hurricane. And the night before, I said to my husband, what's my crazy story going to be? And he was like, it has to be the monkey boat. And I was like, oh God, yeah, the monkey boat. So I was doing courses in Fort Lauderdale. I was doing my wine courses. And one of the girls on the course was like, oh, there's somebody looking for Irish crew. So I was like, okay. They used to, in Smallwoods Yachtwear, you used to be able, there was like a notice board where you could post jobs, you could post your CV. So I called a number and it was this crazy guy on a Fed ship that was having a big refit. And I was doing some courses and a few other things. So it was kind of like long-term day work. And I was like, yeah, I can do that. And I arrive for the first day of work and there's a cage on the aft deck with 2 lemurs in it, like one red one and one little black and white one. I remember the small one. I'll send you pictures.
Oh my God.
Yeah, the small one was called Panda. I can't remember what the bigger red one. And they had these tiny little nappies, like premature baby nappies, with a hole cut in for the tail to come out. And they were on the boat. And the guy, he wasn't the captain, he was the project manager. And he would go around with these like monkeys on his shoulder, and he was living on board, and they were sleeping in the captain's cabin with him. So I never went in there. I was like, I am not going in there. And then we had carpenters, like this big beautiful Fed ship, and the carpenters built this giant cage in the salon, pretty much the size of the salon. Like, and I'm fairly sure they were on the boss's payroll for the 2 monkeys. And it was just nuts.
To keep on board? Like,
2
why?
monkeys.
Like, permanently on board? Like, that's where they live? They don't go to another house or anything? They just...
That's where he was living.
Lemurs.
Yeah. And the engineer had been on the boat for years, and he had, you know, he lived locally and had a wife and kids. So he was like, this is mad, but like, this kind of suits my life. You know, we got on quite well, and I was doing courses, and I had like my first chief stew job, and I was doing more courses, and I was like looking for like a better chief stew role. And so I was like, this, you know, kind of works for me now. So then I found a job And I left, and I ran into the engineer then about a year later, and I was like, God, that was so mad. Did you stay on for long? And he was like, I did. And then he told me one of the monkeys, the smaller monkey, went missing. And the guy went nuts, and I was like, did he call the police? And he was like, no, he couldn't call the police because years before he had a parrot, a turtle, and he would go down to the Florida Keys and go onto the beach, and people could take pictures with the turtle and the parrot. And the parrot bit a woman one time, and she sued him. So he wasn't allowed to have exotic pets anymore. So he had no permit for the exotic pets. So they were permitless monkeys living on the boat. So he apparently accused the guy, was the main guy from the AV company that we had on board doing the AV system. He accused him, because they had a falling out over something, of stealing the monkey. And so he was like, you know what, I'm not doing this boat anymore. So about a year later, I was up in Georgia in a shipyard, and we were out of the water, and I was on the aft deck, and I looked down, and I could see the captain talking to the AV company guy. And who was awesome. He used to come on the boat. We would have coffee and everything. He was great. So Joe, the captain, lovely man, came up, and I was like, oh my God, is that Lewis? And he was like, yeah. And he was like, God, he talks too much. And I was like, oh no, I love him. And so he was like, right, well, we're having a big meeting later, big project management meeting later. And I was like, do you really want to annoy Lewis? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, just ask him, Lewis, where's my monkey? So when the meeting was over, he said to him, like, hey, where's my monkey? And so Lewis kind of flipped out, but then he came on the boat afterwards and saw me, and he was like, oh my goodness. But he was like, yeah, it took 2 years for that to kind of come back and get the laugh. But they never found the monkey. I don't believe that Lewis had anything to do with the monkey, but it was just nuts, like on a Fed ship of all things.
Was illegal monkeys stashed on a Fed ship? Well, at least, I feel sorry for the monkeys. They're not really designed to be on the water, to be honest.
And the cage that they built in the salon didn't have a bottom to it, so it was directly on the carpet.
Oh, lovely.
Well,
I was nice.
I'm having nothing to do with the salon. I'm not cleaning in there. I'll go down to the lower cabins.
I've heard of dogs on board. I've seen I always feel, whenever I've seen dogs that go on boats, I always feel sorry for the deckhands and stuff, because obviously they're going to the toilet somewhere. But a monkey? Really? Well, 2 monkeys.
2 monkeys. They have diapers on. They're little. So they had the little premature baby nappies on because they're little, and they were young. But
I've never heard that before. Thank you.
So, but yeah, they had. He was like, but they have their diapers on, and I was like, this is. And also, I just couldn't picture him like going into Walgreens or whatever, picking up the tiny little nappies for his 2 monkeys. So
that's so weird.
Yeah, I'll send you pictures.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah,
and it's we can finish the episode with the final slide of them.
Yeah, because I kind of forget, and then once a year, like I've Amazon photos, and your memories pop up, and I'll be like, oh yeah, there's the monkeys.
There's monkeys.
But I had very little to do with them by choice. I was like, because he was like, do you want to hold them? I was like, no, I don't. No, sir.
Thank you very much for telling your story. I'm always shocked with these stories. Like, I always think, it's just going to be the same. No. Weird. Still weird. And it still gets shocked.
We were just like, how does this guy have a job? We figured he must have something on the owners. He must have compromising pictures or something that he can live on the boat with no qualifications and his 2 monkeys. So.
Weird. Thank you very much for sharing. It's been a pleasure having you on. Inspirational. Another woman that's taken it on, dealt with everything, but still, kind of remain quite positive. But what resonates with me most out of our conversation is there is joy to be found in a simple life.
Yeah.
And it takes a while after having such a dramatic, exciting, glamorous. It takes a while to kind of come down from that and go, but there's joy to be had in a simpler life.
But I think having my son later, at 35, 36, and like I did the Northwest Passage, I've been through the Arctic, like I've done the Med, I've done the whole east coast of the US. So I was like, I've lived my life. I'm ready for this now. So I think sometimes it's nicer to have had all of that, and I can look back on it and I can encourage that sense of adventure in my son, and he can, he loves to run away and escape as it is. So
he'll definitely have to obey orders that are on board. Yeah. Thank you very much for being a guest. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so
and
much.
I'm sure we can find another way to get you back on as well.
I know you said you were going to do a motherhood series. So
yeah, we'll maybe get you involved in that. So ladies, if you've enjoyed this podcast, thank you very much for joining us. We do have obviously more episodes on the horizon, so please join us again. If we touched anything in the episode and you want more information, we've got our website and we've got the Pearls of Wisdom app, so please have a look. In the new year, we will be doing our Thursday Night Lives again. So yeah, just reach out and connect, and we'll see you all next time.